welcome to the Murrow Symposium. Welcome to our panel on trust in local news, transformation, innovation, and a bunch of other Asians, including my transition lenses that I now wear. I'm Ben Shores. I'm chair of the Department of Journalism Media Production here at the Murrow College. I joined in 2008. I also direct the Murrow News Fellowship Program, which is a state-funded initiative to put journalists out in the field, including with some of our partners. This is an embarrassment of riches from our panelists, each of whom could deliver a keynote. So I'm going to get to the questions as quickly as I can so that you can hear from them and not from me. We'll try to save a few minutes at the end for questions from the audience, but if not, all these folks have generously given their time to be here, and so let's do just quick introductions. I'm going to start with Rufus Friday. Rufus is the executive director of the Center for Integrity in News Reporting, which is dedicated to restoring trust in journalism by the promotion of ethical and unbiased reporting. Rufus, before this, was the president and publisher of the Lexington Herald Leader, as well as the Tri-City Herald just down the road. So Rufus, welcome back. Renee Sinclair is the president and CEO of TVW, which is Washington's award-winning public affairs media network covering the Washington legislature, the executive branch, the Supreme Court, all things state government. Prior to that, Renee was both a journalist for 14 years as well as a member of the House of Representatives in the state of Washington. So Renee, thank you for joining us. Dan Rasmussen is an Emmy-winning newsroom manager at KABC-TV in Los Angeles, and as of this morning, breaking news, also a national nominee for a Peabody for the coverage. Yes. For coverage of the wildfires in Los Angeles. And Dan is also a member of our professional advisory board, a new inductee or enlistment, I guess, into our advisory board. So thank you, Dan. And Ryan Blethen is publisher of the Seattle Times newspaper, the local family newspaper started by Ryan's great-great-grandfather, Alden, in 1896, and a graduate of Washington State University. And I want to start with you, Ryan, and then we'll move around. But Ryan, there was a great piece by Linda Mapes in the Seattle Times that ran shortly after you were named publisher in January of this year. The title of that piece is Why Frank Blethen Spent His Family's Fortune to Save Seattle's Newspaper. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why the family fortune has been invested in local news and in ownership of the Seattle Times.
There we go. Just have to get closer. Anyway, you can tell I'm not a broadcast person. Well, because my dad always had the saying that we don't publish a newspaper to make money. We publish a newspaper to make money to fund journalism. So it was, and I did kind of chuckle because the days of rich newspaper families are long past. So it is more of a labor of love now more than anything. But it's what we love to do. We love serving Seattle and the state, and none of us could imagine doing anything else really. So, we had some assets that we unloaded to make that happen. It was mostly land around the Seattle Times. Yeah. So now we're surrounded by Amazon.
You now have over 100,000 digital news subscribers as well as your print subscribers per an inside source at the Seattle Times.
Yeah.
Talk about the transformation of the Times, and then we're going to come down to Dan and others about this transition within the media world. But
Yeah.
at the Times.
Yeah, I mean, like when I started in the mid '90s, we were a advertising supported business, and it really, funded everything we did. Newsroom, we could offer cheap subscriptions because we made so much money in advertising. That model's completely flipped. In 2013, we launched a paywall, and we've been slowly growing that, and we went from 0 to 108,000 paid digital subscribers now, which makes up probably about 70% of our revenue, is the digital side of the house. Print's still really important, though. I'm a print guy. I love print, and it still makes economic sense to do it. But that transition, it started in earnest in 2013, and then really picked up around the pandemic. Well, in the first Trump administration too, we saw a huge spike in digital subscribers. So that we had that Trump bump. It hasn't been as great this second time around, but
yeah.
So.
Dan, how about on the broadcast side? Are we in a moment of transition or crisis or innovation? Where are we at right now?
Yes.
All of the above.
Yes to all. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we are, if you pay attention to broadcast headlines at all in the industry, there's a lot of consolidation happening. I recognize some folks in the room who work at stations who have new owners. We're always concerned. Our parent company is the Walt Disney Company, so we're always, when people say, don't they do cartoons and theme parks and Marvel and ESPN? What do they do with local news? So we're always a little worried that they're going to spin us off, but I think they see value in us. There's Disney owns 8 local stations in the largest markets, New York, LA, Chicago, and a few more. So I think we are in definitely a state of consolidation across the industry. And I think that's necessary for survival. I think it also creates a lot of opportunities for new ways of doing this, because the need for information and trusted information isn't going away. So that traditional path of working for a station that's owned by these days a corporate owner, which is what I do, is not the only path, right? There's a lot of ways to get information out there. So I think consolidation and fragmentation are kind of the 2 biggest things that we as an industry face. But it kind of means that there's multiple opportunities there, because there are still opportunities to work at these traditional institutions. I mean, I was very proud to tell Ben that my station, along with ABC News, was nominated for a Peabody. It was for the LA fires in early 2025, and it was the craziest thing that I've ever been a part of, like more than 10,000 homes burned. And it also showed how vital a service we provided to that community, which sometimes gets lost. And in the aftermath, I remember emailing the dean. I was on a little bit of a soapbox, probably due to lack of sleep and adrenaline and stress, about this is why what we do is so important, because we brought all the resources we had to bear to serve our community. So I think we are at a time of all of those risks and all of those challenges, but also a period of great opportunity to break through all that clutter, because there's a lot of information out there, and it doesn't all go through the standards that you guys are learning here, and that at the legacy institutions and non-legacy institutions, right? Nobody has a monopoly on good journalism. So I think there's a great opportunity to be a trusted source.
Renee, let's follow up on the importance of local news, but particularly local news with a public affairs bent. And can you talk a little bit about your mission and how we engage folks in public affairs news?
We have to share.
Yeah.
We're sharing today. So TVW, for those of you who don't know us, has a small contract with state government to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of all 3 branches of government. And our world is really focused on the fact that the taxpayers of Washington have a right to know what their government is doing. And so we cover every event of state government in such a way that what you are receiving at home, whether through your television or through some other digital resource like a tablet or a phone, is pretty much like sitting in the room with those decision makers. And I want to touch on what's changed for us in the last few years a little bit, if you don't mind.
Please.
In 2017, thankfully, TVW had the foresight to put cameras in the governor's conference room. We had not been that closely connected to a governor before 2017. And as you recall, in 2020, Washington became a home to the first documented case of COVID in the United States. And TVW at that point was the only access point to the governor and the daily press conferences that he started holding on March 16th of 2020. And that changed our viewership because by 2020, we were covering everything in state government, but when the governor started holding those daily press conferences, the world tuned in to see how the United States was going to manage the pandemic. And because of the worldwide nature of the World Wide Web, our viewership grew dramatically internationally. And I naively thought that once that emergent quarantine period of the pandemic was over, that our viewership would go back to primarily a Northwest-based audience. That has not been the case. Our international audience has only continued to grow. And that's really the biggest difference that we've seen at TVW. And I think it shows that there is definitely a hunger for full content of what's happening with governments, not only in Washington State, but around the country and around the world. And I think it also highlights just how important the work of organizations like the Seattle Times, and I am a proud digital subscriber, not only to the Times, but to many other papers around the state. And it's kind of hard to watch what's happening with the print media, but they are still such a valuable resource. If you want to know what's going on in a community, that's where you turn. And so for us, our viewership has changed dramatically, and yet the thing I hear over and over and over again is how much people want that local news.
So, Rufus, your work at the Center for Integrity in News Reporting looks at another aspect of this, which is how do we restore trust? How did we get to this crisis in trust? And I don't mean to be dramatic, but when we look at the polling numbers, there is a crisis in trust. Talk a little bit about where you see the media right now through the lens of trust and how we get folks to come to a common understanding of the role of news and journalism.
Well, like I said before, the figures do not lie as far as where we are at trust in media right now. If you're tracking the Gallup polls that have been going on for over 50 years, you'll note that trust in media is at an all-time low. Last September, when the numbers came out, they went down again to about 28% of the public trust media. And, I think right now I think we're in a transition of both, maybe, but I call it a reset moment. It gives us this opportunity to take a hard look at the importance of, as we promote at the center, the objective method for news reporting. This mic going up. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sometimes I can talk too loud. But we talk about the objective method to news reporting, and that objective reporting to news reporting talks about getting both sides of the story, leading with some empathy, going into a story where you may not know the outcome of it, but you go in it with a little bit of humility. And I think that one of the things that we have this opportunity right now in that reset moment is to take a hard look and get back to being a news organization or a news medium that understands the true. I'm trying to think of a word that I can use here. The true meaning of what it entails to be objective, to be fair, and more importantly, to be impartial in what we do.
Yeah. I wonder if others could talk about that and the issue of trust in your media organizations. How do you build community trust? I'll open it up, Renee. Renee, as a state, a news organization in particular that receives state funding and may be problematic for in some corners. Tiny bit.
Little bit of state funding. So for us, trust is everything because we are providing that gavel-to-gavel coverage that I mentioned earlier, but we also produce a stable of regularly created shows. And we also produce a couple of documentaries every year, and then we have a very robust Teach with TVW component that works in classrooms around the state. And credibility is absolutely key to everything we do. So when we're working on those produced products, we spend a lot of time almost in every corner of our building talking about the words that we choose to use as we're talking about issues, because most of the time we're letting decision makers speak in their own words, but there are times when we are augmenting a conversation with our produced programming. And we're talking about the words we choose to use, and we're talking about the images that we choose to use to illustrate those words. Because, frankly, nobody cares what I think. Nobody cares what our on-air host producers think. We want to share with you all sides of a story so that you can make up your own mind about how you feel about an issue. It's our job to provide you with that information, and it's your job to do with it as you will. And so we're regularly dealing with those issues, as I said, in every corner of our building, and I think we're better for that. I work with an incredibly creative, smart, compassionate group of people who care deeply about the product they are presenting to you. And I can't express enough how our reputation as an organization is dependent on our ability to not impose our own point of view on any story.
You know, if I can, Ben,
Yeah.
I can just interject one thing that we do. One of our key initiatives that we have at the center is getting media organizations, whether it be broadcast, cable, digital, to adopt a statement of core journalistic values, but then more importantly, to publish those or to broadcast those or to put those out there so that you, the public, can hold them accountable for what their standard core values stand for. And for the most part, it needs to be something that we like to advocate, it's 200 words or less that someone can read in less than a minute, and that it's really succinct and concise, and that it kind of follows the Society of Professional Journalists ethics policy as far as news reporting as well. One of the things that we feel like that's taking place right now that's confused the public is that there's the line between opinion and news reporting is so blurred that the average reader, average viewer has no idea if they're looking at or watching or reading something that's news related or if it's opinion. And that's why we are really big advocates in our mission of getting news organizations to consider adopting, publishing. We've got a number of organizations that are right now publishing their statement of core values either on A2 of their print product or on the home page of their website in a prominent spot where readers and viewers can say, okay, now I know how to hold you accountable for what you stand for as it pertains to news reporting.
Yeah. Dan, can you talk a little bit about trust in broadcast?
I mean, I think soapbox a little bit. It all starts with it's earned, right? Like you earn that trust. You earn it by being transparent. You earn it by having those conversations. You earn by showing up. You earn it, and then you don't just earn it in hope, but you earn it, and then you follow through. And then if you make a mistake, you're transparent. I think that's, if I'm being fully transparent, that's one of the things that my industry is not the greatest about, right? Like it's not like we don't generally. We'll put corrections in our digital copy. We're not updating stories in the way that maybe print traditionally did. But we work really hard to earn that trust. And I think we're all sort of involved in these traditional media entities. But the same goes, like we're content creators too, right? Like it's just the distribution point. So I think you earn it, and then you kind of sell it a bit. Like we have a fantastic promotions team at ABC7, and they make sure people they prove it. They put the proof out there. It's some of this is a little bit of a journalistic evolution to, we call it process language. Any TV journalists know that phrase? But it's kind of to reveal to people the process you went through to get to the point of what you're reporting. And I think that's a key way to build that trust is to show up, to earn it, to peel back the layer a little bit. And I think that's part of why a lot of, call it new media, whatever you want to call it, is sometimes more successful because it is a bit more transparent. And so I think that's something that we strive hard to do. We have very robust social followings on every platform, and so we can meet people where they are and show them what we're doing so they can believe us and that we're worth listening to.
Ryan, how does the Times work to build community trust?
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of what Dan said, showing up and being there. One of the ways I think about it is, when you look at where our subscribers live, they tend to be in places like Mercer Island, the north side of Seattle, and Bellevue. And I want to see actually us do more stories from, say, South Park or South King County than places where we have a high penetration rate, to use an old print term. And so, I don't know if we do that all the time, but I think we're getting better at that. So it's about being there in those communities, especially the ones that have been underserved. I think it's really important. And then to the point of communicating to readers like what we do, I think we've done a terrible job. For people who think about how to communicate, we haven't really told our own story that well at all. And I think we should do much more of that. I think the opinion pages across the country could do a much better job explaining how they do it, why it's important. And I do think endorsements are still important in this day and age. It's something I think we at the Times also need to get better at, is just telling our story and kind of who we are and what we're doing and why we're doing it, most importantly.
Do you see a connection between trust in your organizations and ownership? Ownership models have shifted pretty dramatically. Yeah. Very few family-owned newspapers left, certainly of the size of the Times. What role does ownership and local ownership play in that trust conversation?
I can say selfishly, it matters. At least I like to think so. But I'm in Seattle and I live there, and my kids goes to public school there. I have a daughter here at Wazoo, and so we're here in the community, and it does make you think more about how you run the paper when you are there accountable to the people. Now, it's a little different, say, like when I worked in Yakima as a young reporter, it's like you'd go to a restaurant and you'd be in the bathroom and run into somebody you just wrote about. It's like, and now in Seattle, that's, doesn't happen quite as frequently, but it does happen. And I've noticed now, since I've become publisher, I get a lot more phone calls telling me what we're doing wrong. But I think that's part of it, right? It's being there and listening to those kind of complaints or concerns. I think ownership does matter, and I think we still have 170 people in our newsroom. That's not what it used to be, but it's still, for a paper our size, it's pretty good. A lot of papers our size are much smaller now, and I think that has to do with ownership. I'd say the consolidation of newspaper ownership has been a travesty. It's decimated once great newsrooms, and I don't think they can ever get it back. And I don't think in this current regulatory environment the feds are going to be of any help. I think it does matter who owns you.
And if I could camp on that for a moment, the center, we're 2 years into the creation of the center, and some of the best successes that we've had so far with encouraging news organizations to adopt and, more importantly, publish a statement of core values has been with the ownership, companies more so than anything, like the Waco newspapers or the Main Street Media newspapers, which are owned by families. They're the ones that have been early adopters of adopting a statement of core values, because they want their readers in their communities to understand this is how you can hold us accountable when it comes to news reporting and what you can expect as far as us being objective and being fair and transparent. So, my hat's off to Ryan and the Blethens for what they do in their community, because they are well respected and got a really strong brand that's lasted over 100 years.
The trust for young people in the press and in the media is not great right now. And I wonder, a lot of folks get their information today from YouTube or from podcasts, and some of which do have ethical standards, and others are pretty loose with media ethics. And I wonder, how do you reach those other new emerging platforms to talk about trust? Do you build distinctions across platforms?
I mean,
Nobody wants that one, Dan, so you get it.
No, I think I think being there and serving those audiences is key. Our station has 1.5 million subscribers on Instagram, a little less on Twitter, 3.5 million on TikTok, and that old, Facebook, 5.5 million. So those are distribution models by which we can get our product out there and make $0. Great. However, we're on YouTube as well, and there is some Facebook gives some money, but and YouTube as well. So I think a key part of it is being there, and I think we all recognize that ship will continue to sail, right? Like, there will be another platform, another distribution method. So the core product needs to remain true to these standards that we've talked about, and then you figure out where to put it, you figure out how you maybe slice it differently for what's appropriate for that content. And I don't know the last time anybody under the age of 25 watched a local TV newscast. You don't have to raise your hands. I know you produced one, so yeah, hopefully you did. But I'm not, what I mean? That's just a reality. So it's key to be in all those places. I think that's the first step to building trust, because the other contributors of information do not have the same standards, and in some cases those other entities are one of their key goals is to keep beating us down, right? And to keep increasing that lack of trust in the traditional media. So you have to be there.
Renee? Yeah.
So I agree, you have to be there. The nature of this business is you have to keep attracting new eyes, and if you're not doing that, you're going to die. For us, the theory is if we can capture someone's attention to drive them to the deeper content, to the full source document, either a floor debate or a Supreme Court hearing or whatever we're producing, that is our goal. And the interesting thing that we've discovered really within the last 12 to 16 months is that we are converting more and more of those scroll by viewers to the deeper information. And even in some of the reports I've been reading, I think there is a hunger for more authentic news, and it's real easy on social media platforms to just gravitate. We're human, after all, and it's our human nature to gravitate toward the things that we already believe in. But I think there is an emerging hunger for a different kind of news that's a little more in depth than you can usually grab in 90 seconds on a social media platform, or maybe 3 to 5 minutes on YouTube. And I think there is sort of a resurgence in an interest in that kind of information.
I want to pick up on what Renee said, which I think is forward-looking, and talk about what a newsroom looks like 10 years from now. Right? Who owns that newsroom? Who works there? How do they make money? How do they build trust? Do anyone want to offer up some thoughts on that?
I would hope we still own the paper in 2036. So
likewise,
that's a pretty easy answer for me. But how we make money? That's a good question, because like I said, we've kind of flipped to a subscription-based business, which is working for us and working well. But we have to keep growing our subscriber base. because eventually I'm assuming, we're going to get to a point where print doesn't make sense anymore. And so digital's going to have to carry the full freight. So, does that mean geographical expansion, topical expansion? Those are all things we're going to have to start thinking about. Who's employed at the paper? I still like to think a whole bunch of journalists, editors, photographers, visual journalists. I can't speak much to like some of the back end features. I think, with the emergence of AI, we might see, some things in like finance and whatnot be more automated. I don't know. But so I still see, I don't want to say a traditional newspaper, but, a news organization that's probably web-based and, would like to keep our newsroom around the size it is now and grow it if possible.
Yeah.
So with humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for that
Yeah.
addendum. Yeah.
I just
Renee.
have to touch on that too. AI is the buzzword of the day, and I was on a panel last week in which we had this conversation, and true journalism, I believe, will always be driven by humans. We can use AI, and TVW's been using AI for years to write code and to serve as our caption editor. And we use it because it can be taught. You can train it to be better tomorrow than it was today. But we're not using it to write stories, and we're not using it to check facts. And I was on a panel last week in which I learned the new term, a human-driven newsroom. And I love that phrase because I think newsrooms, good newsrooms, will always be human-driven. The other thing that I think we need to be thinking about, and we're seeing this more and more at the national level and even now here in Washington State, there is very definitely a difference between activism and journalism. And we have folks who really want to be activists and then tell their own story, and I respect that. I don't have a problem with them doing that, but let's not call it journalism because really it isn't.
Good.
That's so true, because that's exactly what we talk about a lot, Renee, ourselves. I mean, that's one of the things that we continue to try to drive home more so than anything, and that is those individuals that want to, mask accuracy in news reporting with its opinion. It's analysis, it's commentary, and that's what's blurred the lines and just gotten a number of folks confused with am I getting trustworthy news information, or are you just telling me something that I want to hear because of my own personal bias that I have.
Dan, how about the future of the television newsroom? 10 years from now, all avatars, some humans. What does it look like?
I hope not. No, I mean, I think the consolidation and fragmentation, right? We've seen this over the last however many decades. We'll continue to see it. There is going to be a continued need for content on all these platforms. I think you're seeing that in very much real time right now with very large station ownership groups that just keep getting larger. So I would foresee that continuing to happen. I think the key with regard, like AI can help you serve all of those different distribution points. I think when we talk about that, like a camera is a tool, a microphone is a tool, a ring light is a tool, AI is a tool. I think that's when we talk about what the future newsroom looks like, I kind of get back to that distribution part of it again. And I think we have to be in all these places, but your newsroom and my newsroom cannot afford to have one person who's dedicated to just one of these platforms. So that's where the AI comes in, right? The tool that it's not creating a story, it's not doing anything editorial, but it's slicing up a piece of video so it works in different formats on different places. And maybe it starts on linear, but it's going to go to every social platform, and it's going to go to our mobile app as well. So hopefully we can make a little bit more money on it, or any money on it. So I think that's what I would hope that future would look like. Still very much human driven, but utilizing those tools that will reveal themselves in the next decade to help us continue to do that.
Yeah, I think also, back in 1972, the education industry went through a wringing of the hands with a new tool that came on the scene, and it was when Texas Instruments created the first calculator. And the educators were all up in arms. What do you mean? Students are not going to be able to use a slide rule or be able to actually do math the old-fashioned way? A calculator is not going to take over doing that work and going to take over my job. It's one of those things where, like you said before, AI is a tool, but there's always going to be the need for that human interaction.
Yes.
And that human interaction within the community that only a journalist, a human journalist, can actually apply and provide for the community.
I'm going to go off script with our questions. And I wonder, as we talk about trust and technology and being balanced in our approach, being unbiased, but also knowing that sometimes a spade's a spade, and that objectivity is not the same as truth, right? And how do you balance that? Because I think a lot of young people are looking for authenticity in these spaces, and they're finding it in various locations. And I wonder how you balance that, this desire for authenticity versus this balanced approach, this unbiased approach.
At the center, we like to say that we think that the audience, the reader, you are very smart and can determine what's true and what's not. And there is one individual that the reason why the center got started 2 years ago, the creator was Walter Hussman. He was on a bike trip in Vietnam. And he said he was looking for some news on some news on what was going on in the States, and he turned on a commercial, and it was on CNN. And there was a very prominent journalist that was on the CNN doing an advertisement, and it said that I don't believe in the false equivalency of giving both sides. It's my job to tell you what the truth is. And it was one of those things we said, wait a minute now. Journalism 101, false equivalency of not giving both sides. I thought it was always the journalist's responsibility to try to give all sides, and then let the reader determine what they feel like is accurate and true or not.
Mm-hmm. Can I push back?
So this is my hot button issue.
Yes, okay, good.
So I'm really old. And when I grew up, we all got the same newspaper delivered to our home about 3:30 in the afternoon. And then when my dad got home, we sat down and watched a half hour of local news, followed by Huntley and Brinkley. And basically everybody in our community was consuming the same content. With the advent of cable news, we shifted to a 24/7 news cycle. And to fill that time, we started getting a lot more opinion and a lot more entertainment that might not have been considered news in the past. And I don't have a problem with that, but it's not news, and we shouldn't really call it news. It's a business model. And just like the newspaper industry has had to change and the broadcast industry has had to change, that business model is about delivering an audience to advertisers. Perfectly fine business model. But in order to do that, you kind of have to pick a side. And the way you keep delivering that audience is to keep them angry so they'll keep coming back. And that is not news. We should stop calling it news.
Authenticity is a bit of a trigger word for me because I think it gets used to sort of cover up exactly. It's like I'm authentic, which means I'm going to tell the part of the story that it may be all 100% true what I'm going to tell you, but it might not have all the context, right? It might leave out some perfectly reasonable other sides to the story. So I think, to your point, identifying a product for what it is key. And then I think if you are doing news, I think it's your job to point out the contradictions, right? There's plenty of those to be found, and I think that's where you're not trying to lead anyone anywhere, but you're giving them the whole story. You're giving them the context for what was said a year ago, or what data says to support things. And I think you can deliver information that way without getting into selling that product of opinion and persuasion. It's an imperfect science.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you do hear a lot of the false equivalency debate nowadays and whatnot, but there are times where, like, we're not going to publish what a Nazi has. If we were writing something about, a white supremacist movement, do we really need to hear what a Nazi has to say about the virtues of white supremacy? No. So I think, it's kind of picking and choosing and creating context around what you're writing about. So it doesn't always mean going to each side, but it does mean, pulling from a variety of sources that kind of paint a picture that helps the reader understand better what's happening in this world.
We're going to go to questions in just 1 minute, but I wonder if really quickly you could just complete this sentence. I'm in journalism because.
Well, I was born into it, so I have to be here. No, I kid. I mean, there was actually in my family, there was never any pressure to do this. I came to it and just fell in love with it. And I think it's just the most rewarding profession you can have. And it just connects you to your community in a way that I don't know of any other job that can do that. And if you love to write and tell stories, it's even better. So.
I'm in journalism because, it's a vital product, and in being part of that vital product, it's also it's thrilling. And from an adrenaline junkie standpoint, it's making decisions quickly. I mean, yesterday, a group of us, if any of you were doing the student newscast yesterday, sorry, I was one of the many alums who were standing in the background. But there's the important part of it, which is really why we should all be doing it. But then there's right, Chris? It's pretty exciting sometimes. It's a dynamic career. It's always changing. It's always evolving. That's why we're having this conversation. So you can do good, and you can be super engaged the entire time.
So I grew up loving news, and I still love news. And I took a 20-year hiatus into the world of politics and was lucky enough to come back to news through TVW. And I will always be grateful for that, and grateful for the amazing team of people I get to work with every day.
I think I'm the oddball here because I came up on the initially on the business side of journalism, but then again, I look back and I want to reassure those that are in the room here that are considering a career in journalism. Just think about this, folks. It's the only industry that over 250 years ago the framers saw fit that they needed to protect it. It's the only industry that has a protection to it. No matter what you may be seeing or what you're hearing today, it's in the Constitution that the press will always be free. And you talk once again about it's always going to be free. It's withstood a tremendous amount of history over its 250-year career. But I look at it from a standpoint, if you're looking for job security, if you're looking for an industry that's going to always be around, it may change, it may reset, it may have its varying degrees of transformations, but it's going to always be around. So, how exciting it is to be in this. I didn't never think that I'd be in a industry that back when I started over, 40 years ago in newspapering, a person who looked like me was not, we were not portrayed very well back then. And I went down and I worked at one of my newspaper stops in the 6 states that I've lived in was in Montgomery, Alabama. I mean, you talk about being in a city where the birthplace of the Confederacy started, as well as the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement. And going in as the first black executive there, trying to get individuals of color to trust in the newspaper, it was difficult and tough. But at the same time, I still look back on what has taken place in this country since that time and how we've evolved and how we've improved so much, that it's an industry that journalism is an industry that I just have had a strong passion for. And like I said before, it's protected. And that's one thing that we all need to make sure that we fully understand as not only journalists, but then also as a people of this great country as well.
Let's go to just quick questions for 5 minutes. Go ahead up front here.
Yeah, my name's Logan, and you mentioned a bit about the broadcast yesterday, and I think a lot of students have trouble finding their voice, and not following their inspirations and mentors. How do you guys find your voices as broadcasters?
How do you find voice? Your voice. Okay, that's open to everyone, I think. But Dan, you want to take first crack?
Last night at Rico's, Chris and I had an interesting conversation about finding one's voice. I started as a newscast producer and moved into a newscast manager role 15 years ago. And I think this is going to sound cheesy. I'm going to say, I said authenticity was my trigger word, and now I'm going to say that I became a more effective manager when I realized how to be true to myself when I was in that role. So I think that's the same as a journalist, right? You don't try and make yourself into something you're not. Lean into your strengths, because it's going to be a lot easier to execute when you're leaning into your strengths. I've had bosses that were quite vocal, and I realized pretty quickly, like, I'm not good at being a boss that way. I'm actually kind of bad at yelling at people, and I'm okay with that. So I think that's sort of, I hope that sort of answers your question, but you sort of find what you're good at and how you're comfortable doing it. You lean in, and away you go.
Arlo?
Yes. So this is kind of a double-barreled question here, but I was wondering, with a lot of newspapers and consolidating, how do you go about reporting a story that might go against what your advertisers, because that might be the main sponsorship, especially the smaller newspapers, that might be the main source of revenue? How do you report a story, tell it in an authentic way that's true to that when there is advertisers involved? And also, how do you avoid, interjecting your opinion where you see blatant corruption in a situation? How do you avoid interjecting your opinion into that and kind of shifting it into like a narrative? How do you still portray the corruption without basically getting yourself involved?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll take that one. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't care what advertisers think. I mean, you can't. And it's my job now as publisher to be the buffer between the newsroom and advertisers. And if advertisers have a problem, they can come talk to me about it. If they don't like it, they don't have to give us their money, which is unfortunate, but, we also do a fair amount of community funding. We have 25 positions right now that are community funded, and it's the same thing. If people who give us money, they don't have special access and whatnot. We're very upfront about that up front, and we've actually given people sizable donations back when they've been upset about coverage we've done. So you got to just lay those ground rules and then hope you have management that's willing to not really give a crap about what advertisers think. So, and in terms of if you're writing about corruption and whatnot, I don't think you have to inject what you think, because it's usually going to be outrageous enough or whatnot that people will see it and understand, like, okay, well, this is clearly bad. So, yeah.
Well, second week on the job, when I was in Lexington, our sports reporter, Jerry Tipton, did a story on John Calipari. And John had just won what he thought was his 500th basketball win, and the university was prepared to do a large celebration. But our sports reporter reported that John was they were counting his wins at UMass and also at Memphis, which were vacated because of some improprieties there. So we ran a story on it. I was, like I said, for 2 weeks on the job, had this advertiser call up that had a large conglomerate of auto dealerships that was there and said that you need to fire Jerry Tipton right now, or we're going to pull all of our advertising, and I got a half a dozen other dealers that are going to do the exact same thing as well. So, you as Ryan say, we're the publishers of the buffer. So we asked the question, you may not like the story, but tell me something that's inaccurate in this. I can correct inaccuracies, but I can't correct facts. So tell me something that's factually wrong with the story. But once you talk them down, then they come back in line again. But for the most part, the threat of pulling advertising, you don't ever want to get into a point to where they're going to hold you ransom as a result of something that has been run in the newspaper. Now, on the opinion side, if the editorial board has written something that a advertiser does not like, I always give them the opportunity to write a letter, and we'll be more than happy to print that in our product as well, because I always tell individuals, in an opinion page, the editorial page has the smallest amount of space on it. We like to have as much of the space available for readers and viewers to give their opinion more so than anything.
Great. Well, we could continue for another hour or two, and I would love it. But I want to respect another group, or the next event. Please have lunch, meet some of the students and presenters and network. But first, on behalf of the Murrow College and WSU, thank you to our panelists.